Hey guys.
Everyone, to tonight's episode of Debate Me, Brah, the show where we ask interlocutors to step into the ring and defend their point of view. We are your hosts, James W. and myself, Amy Newman, and on tonight's debate, we are asking the question,
The
ontological
hard questions.
presuppositions? That's right, the very hard questions. Or rather, are there philosophical notions that we assume each day for life to function? And we have both Mark Reid and biblical Christological account for the win here to help us find an answer. So with that, it's
Thanks, guys.
time to debate me, brah.
Our first show of 2022. Welcome to the show.
That's right. Happy New Year, everyone. And hello, all you misfits out there on the intertubes. As always, if you have recently gotten your vaccine or booster shot, now is the time to activate your 5G chip. Boom, boop, boop. And if you're feeling fancy, feel free to like, follow, or subscribe. And you then get access to that bell icon so that you can set it to all and get reminders to see our premieres, like our latest interview with Sandy Lincoln and our live streams. Hello, interwebs.
Hey guys.
And this debate is sponsored by our Patreons, including K.O. Champ, Oz from the Atheist Roundtable, Ian Davenport, a grumpy old cuss, Diana Smith, Pat Lavender, Dale Pastel, Dave Gard, Matt Duke, Rejos, and Rachel Holland. And we want to
Thanks,
send
guys.
all of the love that you can find, and you can help us make even more content at patreon.com/Amy Newman. And with that, I am Amy Newman, and this is my co-host James W. We are tonight's moderators, and our job is making sure these two wonderful debaters don't talk over each other, though we don't mind if things get a little bit spicy. Speaking of spicy, that's right. Tonight's debate topic is ontological presuppositions, with biblical Christological account for the win, taking the positive, and Mark Reid taking the negative. We will have a Q&A section at the end of the debate, so if you have a question for either debater or both, feel free to tag James W. or myself in chat at Amy Newman. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our first interlocutor to introduce themselves and give their up to 10-minute opening statement. Biblical Christological account for the win. The floor is all yours.
Yes, biblically, this is Biblical Christological Account, FTW, with a YouTube channel titled Biblical Christological Account, FTW. I'll articulate this brief presentation contra thou. Biblically, our meta-ontotheologically, omnibenevolent, eternally ethereal, immutably ultimate, and actus purus biblical Christological God unequivocally is antecedently the stipulator for the immunity of ye sempiternal actualities to prima facie be humanly apprehensible. Biblically, our biblical Christological God has promulgated herself at terminus a quo throughout human meta-ontologies, which comports with Romans 1:20 in the New Testament of the Bible. Ergo, objective veracity of meta-ontotheological benevolence supervenes for human identification, which comports with John 3:16 in the Bible. So Romans 1:20, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Biblically, via the law of polarity, inconclusively with a reductio ad absurdum, unimpeachably unshrouds an ultimately impersonal reality to be paralogistically fictitious. Biblically, because all inert singletons unequivocally abide via our meta-ontotheologically ultimate biblical Christological God as the antecedent nascent creator for the totality of tangible particulars. Biblically, that will be my presentation. I yield my time over to the next person.
Thank you,
Thank
biblical
you so
Christological account.
exactly for your 10-minute or up to 10-minute opening statement. And with that, we are going to hand it over to the negative with Mark Reid. The floor is all yours.
No, thank you very much, biblical. I'm just going to call you biblical. It's way too much of a mouthful to say the other thing. I'm just going to share my screen. Just 1 second. And I will... Okay. I should have brought my thesaurus. That was quite a mouthful you had there. So today we're discussing ontological presuppositions. I know what you're all thinking. It's basically like a medical name for a suppository that cures constipation. You know, like I was all blocked up and took an ontological presupposition and cleared it right up. That's not what it is, and it isn't as scary as it does sound. So I'm just going to go through exactly what I think it is and what I think some of the problems with it is. So this is ontological versus epistemological studies, basically. So ontology is the study of things that actually exist. So epistemologically, if you believe in God and you give reasons for your belief and you justify your belief or your knowledge, that's epistemology. The actual existence of God is independent from any belief justification that you might present. And it doesn't matter how hard you believe it or you know, so the reasons you give. Ontology is concerned with just what is, not what we believe to be the truth. So what the other side of it, what is a presupposition? So the first sentence is kind of wordy. It's when the speakers mark linguistically information that is taken for granted rather than being the main propositional content. That basically it means that you're presupposing something has already occurred or something already exists in order to frame it a reference, to talk about it, or to present a view. For instance, I'll give you a couple of examples. You know, you may presuppose that the script has been written in your favorite TV show, that the main character has died. And you can presuppose this, and then you can talk about that subject with somebody and discuss it. And that's what a presupposition is. Like, for instance, I when writing this, I presupposed that all of Amy's audience reads English. Now, that might not necessarily be the case, but it's what I have presupposed. And this is the reason for presuppositions. So they allow us to take actions, they allow us to entertain conditions, and I do want to make clear that it doesn't mean they're a bad thing. We all make presuppositions in order to justify certain conditions. But the problem comes if you presuppose too much, you have a greater chance of being wrong. For instance, somebody tells you their cat died. You can presuppose they were hit by a car, and then you can talk to somebody about the dangers of having pets loose and cars on the road and all these different things based upon that presupposition. But if you go to, oh, well, I presuppose it was a red car, well, then you've got a much higher chance of being wrong. And then if you presume it's a red Porsche, you've got a very, very high degree of being wrong. So we try to only presuppose what is absolutely necessary and then find reasons for the rest. Presuppositional apologetics is the theistic fiction that takes for granted the necessity of God. So you basically take it for granted that God is absolutely necessary for any worldview to be coherent. Problems. So presuppositions are only designed to appeal to those people that agree with the presupposition, or basically believe it already, or believe the conclusion of the presupposition. Dr. Graham Oppy, who's an amazing mind, wrote that none of them are persuasive. None of them provides to those who do not already accept the conclusion that God exists, and if those people are reasonable, and I am sort of paraphrasing here, they don't provide a pro tanto or a all things considered reason to accept the conclusion. And that's the problem. You have to already agree with them in order for them to provide any kind of reason to believe them. The presuppositions have no guarantee to be ontologically true. So that means that you can presuppose things, but that doesn't make them true. Like, for instance, the car example with hitting the pet. You can presuppose all kinds of things about this car. It gives no definitive, clear case that will actually be true. The third problem, you can presuppose literally anything. I can presuppose that biblical account, who I can't see, their face, I can presuppose that they're wearing headphones, or that they're naked, or that any of a million other things. I can presuppose that they're a penguin. There's nothing in the world stopping me, but some things are clearly absurd, and Immanuel Kant went into that about how you can presuppose anything, doesn't matter what it is. And the secondary problem is these presuppositions can be completely contradictory. I can presuppose that the cat was hit by a car. I can presuppose that the cat had a heart attack. I suppose both could be true, but one of them probably was the cause of death. So you can do this with presuppositions. And the last one is that presuppositions are just relative to the people making the presuppositions. There is no clear reason why anybody else should accept them, and therefore it is only accepted by the person that presents them. I mean, it can be accepted by the other person, but if they don't accept them, there's no real way to go forward from there, and it's completely sort of uninteresting. And I mean, the absurd presuppositions, they've given rise to these parodies, like the flying spaghetti monster, or magical elves that did something, or any of a billion things that you can presuppose and wind up with exactly the same argument as a god being. Begging the question. Now, this is a logical fallacy. I'll just basically explain it. It's when you present an argument and it has the conclusion in the argument. So the example that I used is God exists because God is a necessary being. It's the necessary being that is begging the question. You haven't demonstrated that. You have just assumed it because the conclusion is in the premises itself. Is it begging the question? Yes. Yes, it is. It 100% is. Shifting the burden of proof. Now, theists often ask you to present evidence to invalidate their presuppositions. Is that shifting the burden of proof? Yes. Yes, it is. The person saying that the presupposition is correct is the one with the burden of proof. And any attempt to sort of say, well, you've got to invalidate the presupposition that I've come up with no evidence, that is definitely shifting the burden of proof. So just a few conclusions. Presuppositions are, well, really useful for pragmatic application and semantic application in discussion. And I mean, I can go through a few pragmatic applications of presuppositions. They don't necessarily describe ontological proof. So they're not necessarily what actually is. Attempting to present a presupposition without any support is begging the question. Attempting to require it to disprove your presupposition is shifting the burden of proof. Now, what does it mean by pragmatic application? There's certain presuppositions that we kind of make in order to just get through life. For instance, you may presuppose, and I do presuppose, that my senses are real for a given level of accuracy. There's no way I can really reason that due to something called hard solipsism. It's the matrix or brain in a vat. You can't be 100% sure you're not just getting electrical signals from a supercomputer somewhere. But I have to presuppose that as a pragmatic application. There's no, and semantic application just is the other examples that I may have used, like a cat being hit by a cart, in order to discuss the semantics of that. But as far as practicality is concerned, I don't see any practical reason why we need a God for in order to live our lives. It doesn't seem to provide any purpose, and the universe seems to continue just fine without implementing that presupposition. So it's really the onus is on the theist to provide why that presupposition is warranted. And to this date, we don't seem to have that answer. But essentially, ontological presuppositions are just taking for granted that God does exist, which of course is a circular argument and a bit of a tautology. God exists because God exists. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so very much, Mark,
Thanks,
for
guys.
your up to 10-minute opening statement. And with that, all of our chips are now on the table. Thus, we are going to move into our 40 to 60 minutes of open discussion. However, keep sending in those questions for either debater or both by tagging James W. or myself in chat at Amy Newman for our Q&A section at the end. With that, gentlemen, the floor is all yours.
Yes, I had a lot of questions about your introduction, Biblical. I mean, it seemed like a complete mess of just words, and you seem to be taking a biblical presentation, but as far as I know, the topic of the debate is presuppositional. So are you an evidentialist or are you a presuppositionalist?
Biblically, we are all presuppositionalists, and that's in our biblical Christological God. I yield my time over to you.
Well, I mean, everyone makes presuppositions, right, but you're claiming that everybody is a presuppositional theist. Is that correct?
Biblically, all finitudely cuspinated particulars either explicitly or implicitly knows of our biblical Christological God, because our biblical Christological God is meta-ontotheologically omnibenevolent to herself. Ergo, what meta-philosophically supervenes from the meta-ontotheology of our biblical Christological God is divine revelation, which comports with Romans 1:20 in the Bible. Biblically,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Biblically, thy's missive or presentation was not a potential destroyer contra our biblical Christological God. Because every time you use the proper noun God, you are consciously appealing to the omnitudinous of our biblical Christological God. In other words, the actus purus, which is a philosophical Latin term for the absolute perfection of our biblical Christological God. So biblically, for a zoetic, ethereal, ultimate, omnipresent / infinitude in size / absolute / unlimited in size God to be understood within our finitudely dualistic vessels requires divine revelation. Biblically, my earlier unimpeachable statement still remains meta-philosophically standing contra thou, is that thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God. Respond.
Yeah, what a absolute gish gallop of words. So when you say biblically, like the carcinated particulates know of God, you're basically saying all entities know of God. I get that. Where in the Bible is it stated that is meta-ontologically benevolent?
Biblically, clarifying questions aren't
don't have-
potential destroyers contra our biblical Christological God.
It's a clarifying question. It's a clarifying question. I mean, if you want to just trot out, oh, God exists because meta-ontologically I think God exists, well, great. I mean, that's fantastic. But you haven't actually addressed anything that I've said.
Biblically, thy's missive is not a potential destroyer contra our biblical Christological God.
You just said lies missive. That means you saying I'm lying. I'm asking you a question. How can I be lying?
Biblically, thy's missive is not a potential destroyer contra our biblical Christological God. Respond.
Yeah, so you said lies missive. You're calling me a liar.
Biblically, thy's missive is not a potential destroyer contra
you've said
our
that.
biblical Christological God.
Are you calling me a liar?
Biblically, clarifying questions aren't potential destroyers contra our biblical Christological God.
I'm not saying they are. I'm asking you clarifying questions because you seem to want to sort of not explain what you're actually, the ideas and concepts that you're trying to get at. You seem to be couching them in this language that is designed to obscure meaning. So I have to ask you clarifying questions because you are using such obscure terms. So can you explain why you claim it to be meta-ontological, but what does that mean? Meta-existential?
Biblically, your clarifying questions are informal fallacies, as you haven't properly addressed my earlier unimpeachable statement contra thou.
Well, hold on. You accused me of making a fallacy. What fallacy?
Biblically, you're shifting the topic from our biblical Christological God onto me. Ergo, address my brute fact properly, is that thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God.
I'm addressing your argument. That's not shifting it onto you. I haven't said anything personal about you. I'm addressing your argument that you're presenting. That's the nature of debate. And we're discussing your presupposition of God right now, that you basically say, well, you can't touch my presupposition of God. You can't discuss it because it is a brute fact or it is just meta-ontologically true, whereas the topic of the debate is ontological presuppositions. So for you to say that basically says, well, I want to come in here and present a presupposition that I have. I want to come in here and present that the cat was hit by a car. And when I say, how do you know that? You basically say, well, you can't discuss that because I have a meta-ontological knowledge of it.
Biblically, as I to reiterate what I said contra thou earlier, is that we share the same meta-ontology in conjunction with our meta-ontotheologically omnibenevolent Christological God.
Well,
Ergo,
yes.
thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God.
Well, yeah, we have the same ontology, but what I'm getting at is I doubt that you have the correct ontology. That what you're saying the ontology is, i.e., a God concept, is actually ontology. That it is actually true. I don't, unless you're a subjectivist. I don't claim that everybody has their own reality. It's the same one reality. But I'm doubting you when you say, I presuppose this is the nature of reality. And you can't seem to justify that in any way, except to say, you're not allowed to challenge my presuppositions, which is, clearly absurd.
Biblically, to recapitulate my earlier point contra thou, is that every time thou uses the proper noun God, thou has to either subconsciously or consciously appeal to the absolute perfection of our biblical Christological God for a zoetic, omnitude, ethereal, ultimate, etc. God to be understood requires divine revelation for all those attributive adjectives and adnouns to be intelligible, again, requires divine revelation. Biblically, to reiterate my earlier unimpeachable statement contra thou, is that thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God.
Okay, so you're basically saying in order to comprehend something perfect, you've got to have experienced that perfect thing. Is that what you're saying?
Biblically, clarifying questions
maybe respond
potential.
in.
Do not interrupt me.
Maybe respond in English rather than this gallop of words.
Guys,
do not interrupt me.
I'm just going to pull you both apart for a second and then do a restart. All right, back to you guys.
Biblically, to reiterate what I was saying before I was interrupted, is that thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God.
I can't destroy something that doesn't exist. So the thing is, I've just finished.
You have contradicted yourself.
No. God, you said you have to appeal to, you have to have the absolute perfection whenever you appeal to God, and you have to acknowledge the omni nature of God. But that is not what I think of when I refer to God, and it's not what I am referring to when I refer to God. I'm referring to the concept of God, not the God itself. The remarkable thing about the human mind, and the hallmark of a good mind, is to be able to entertain concepts whether or not they exist. So just because I bring up a God who is by concept perfect doesn't mean that a perfect God exists. Just in the same way, I think it was Guglielmo who brought up the perfect island. You can come up with the concept of the perfect island without actually experiencing that, and the perfect island does not exist. We can do this. It has been demonstrated.
Biblically, thou has meta-ontologically presupposed the unimpeachable divinity of our biblical Christological God, because for you to say something doesn't exist, your starting premise has to presuppose our biblical Christological God. And because exist is a verb is a doing word, your contradiction is that just because our biblical Christological God doesn't do all things, your proclaim is not a destroyer contra our biblical Christological God.
Did you hear what I said about the perfect island? That you can entertain these claims? Excuse me, I will finish.
I will address your...
Excuse me, sir.
Let Mark finish.
Let me finish, because you didn't seem to understand what it was that I was saying. We can entertain all of these concepts, the perfect island. I can entertain a multi-dimensional alien that is far beyond the concept of God. I can entertain all of these thoughts. I can entertain a green and blue cube in my room. It doesn't make it ontologically true. You are absolutely messing up. And you're veering into definitional ontology, that basically that the definition of something makes it true, which is an absolute mistake. I can define God as a concept that theists believe in and use as the justification for their religion. I can do that. And so anything you can define into existence, I can define out of existence.
Biblically, the concepts of islands, aliens, etc. are all finitively cuspitated. Ergo, it is impossible to be neutral and netting our biblical Christological God, because Z is omnitude. Thus, you have to presuppose the existence of our biblical Christological God in order for the proper noun God to be intelligible, which again comports with Romans 1:20 in the Bible. So I'll reiterate, Romans 1:20 is that for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse.
Yeah,
So,
I'm really not interested in what the Bible says, and this debate isn't about the Bible, so I don't know why you're bringing it up. Yeah, and I would like to address that. I want to make sure you're finished, but we're not. This isn't about biblical referencing at all.
biblically, thy's response is not a potential destroyer contra our biblical Christological God.
Okay, the record's on repeat. The record is on repeat. Okay, so you saying you have to presuppose God in order to reference it. Well, that's kind of correct. I can entertain a God concept, but that doesn't mean that the presupposition is actual ontology. That's where your connection breaks down. And you telling me that I presuppose the ontology of God is mind reading, a sign of a distorted thought. That you think you can tell what I'm thinking is a distorted thought. So I'm going to ask you, do you think that I presuppose the ontology of God?
Well, biblically, allow me to address your earlier points, so you're filibustering too much, is that the divine revelation of our biblical Christological God is still in play. So to summarize that, as you use the proper noun God, you are appealing / cross-referencing that to the divine revelation of our zoetic biblical Christological God. So because Z is eternal, Z is actively letting thou know that Z exists. Ergo, you have yet to properly address my earlier brute fact, as you are committing informal fallacies left and right. So to reiterate my earlier brute fact,
What
that you have
fallacies?
to address my
What
brute
fallacies?
fact.
No, what fallacies? You've accused me of making fallacies. What fallacies?
Biblically, do not interrupt me. So address my brute fact with a yes or
So
a
I can
no.
interrupt you as long as it's not biblically.
Biblically, address my brute fact with a yes or a no. This is a true dichotomy. So do not monologue.
Well, you've
or
accused
filibuster.
me of making fallacies. What fallacies have I committed?
Address my brute
What
fact.
fallacies
Address
have I
my brute
committed?
fact.
No, you made a claim that I committed fallacies. What fallacies have I committed?
Address.
You don't know, do
You're
you?
committing another informal fallacy.
What's that?
So.
What's that? What fallacy is that? What fallacy is that? What fallacy is that?
You're still.
You can't answer. Okay, so he can't answer because he doesn't know any fallacies.
Do not interrupt me. Allow me to finish. Allow me to finish.
Are you committing a fallacy?
Unimpeachable statement. Address my statement with a yes or a no, as this is a true dichotomy. And so thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God. respond.
Okay, so there's a few things that I want to go through. Firstly, an appeal to like a reference of God, a proper noun, does in no way cause that thing to be true. It just doesn't. And the claim that is made of Z is letting you know who I think he's trying to use a he, as in God is letting me know that they exist, is just ridiculous. I can reference a pink rabbit. It doesn't mean the pink rabbit of infinite power and infinite knowledge is letting me know that they exist. It's an absurdity, an absolute absurdity. Secondly, they're making claims that I'm committing informal fallacy after informal fallacy. The problem is they can't say what fallacy, because biblical doesn't know. They don't know what fallacy I'm committing. They're just jumping up and down saying fallacy, 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 because they don't like what I've got to say. It's absolutely shocking that you can be in a debate, accuse somebody of making a fallacy, and then when they say, well, what fallacy? You say, don't interrupt me, I'm not going to say. I'm just going to say fallacy. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, what was your question that required... For a start, it's usually when somebody said it requires a yes or a no, it's usually a loaded question. And the problem is I didn't hear a question. Biblical made a statement, a assertion, and a pretty empty, hollow assertion at that, and it's obviously his presupposition. It isn't requiring a yes or a no. So what is the question? And I do want to underline question biblical, that you would require a yes or a no to, and I'll see if I can answer it.
Biblically, thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God.
Okay, so thou can't destroy our Christological, whatever God. That's not a question. Do you understand what a question
You have
is?
biblically affirm it or the contrary.
It's not a question. Look, if you wanted a question, you would say, do you think you can destroy, or can you in fact destroy? Not you can't destroy. That's a statement. I feel like I'm teaching English here to a very, very...
Biblically, well then, if you can't address my statement, then thou has...
I did.
Subconsciously conceded
I did.
to the awesomeness of our biblical Christological
No,
God.
I said earlier, I said you don't have to destroy something that doesn't exist.
Biblically, you have contradicted yourself again, because...
No. Let me explain. Let me explain.
Your starting premise presupposes our biblical Christological God. So your starting premise starts with our biblical Christological God, and your conclusion is the contrary. So your statement is a contradiction, because the word exist is a verb. A verb is a doing word. So to further elaborate on this is that because our biblical Christological God doesn't do all things, your proclaim is not a defeater.
Okay, so the same argument could be applied to the tri-omni rabbit, the tri-omni pink rabbit that you can presuppose exists. You can say, oh, you can't destroy this rabbit. And I can say, I don't have to destroy something that doesn't exist. And so you can do that with literally anything, even the absolutely absurd. And so it becomes an absurdity. And just because a noun, say, exists, a verb exists, which I'm not sure that, I believe that's an adverb, not a verb. It's not really a doing word. But whatever, okay, just because you use a verb like God sneezed, it doesn't mean that actually exists. This is basic language studies. Like we don't, I can say, my invisible mole rat with 2 tongues just sneezed. It doesn't make it true ontologically. And this is the part that you're not getting, that just because something exists in language doesn't make it ontologically true. And so the God claim, for a start, my God concept is not the same as yours. I'm not presupposing any of these things. And when I say I don't have to destroy something that doesn't exist, it's a conditional. If God exists, then yeah, I can't destroy them. But if God does not exist, I don't have to destroy them because they never existed in the first place.
Biblically, to point out your fallacious reasoning behind a rabbit is that a rabbit is finitely custodiated, ergo, the word rabbit is not the name of our biblical Christological God. And biblically, our biblical Christological God supersedes monad's opponents because our biblical Christological God is omnitude, ergo Z is not contingent on if statements. Biblically, Z is a neo-pronoun, annexing our biblical Christological God. Biblically, I'll reiterate my earlier unimpeachable statement contra thou, that thou hasn't properly addressed, is that thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God.
It's an infinite rabbit, by the way. It's an infinite power, infinite knowledge, infinite everything. It's infinite.
Biblically,
So
you have
that
contradicted
totally
yourself
destroys-
again. You have
you've
contradicted
totally
yourself
destroyed
again.
that.
You have contradicted yourself again. Infinite in size would be a synonym for the omnitudinous of our biblical
It
Christological
is infinite
God.
in size. It's infinite in size.
And a rabbit is a semantic label to a finite in size particular. Ergo, you have contradicted yourself again.
Nope.
Thus, you haven't properly addressed my earlier
No,
unimpeachable
I haven't.
statement.
Because the thing is that definitions can mean almost anything we want, and you can have a giant rabbit. Obviously, it's a rabbit, but it's larger than a rabbit particulate for that label. That's the thing about language. I can have an infinite rabbit. It can have any of the properties I ascribe to it. It can have any property at all, and I have ascribed that to it. It can be an infinite mindless rabbit. It can be anything at all. And I can use that in exactly the same way that you're using Z God. And when you say God is not contingent on if statements, it's like, what? Like, if God doesn't exist, then they're not contingent on anything. They just don't exist.
Biblically, to point out your fallacious reasoning again, and
What's the fallacy?
your rabbit claim.
What's the fallacy? What's the fallacy?
What's
the fallacy? What's the fallacy?
Excuse me, do not interrupt me.
Can't answer the fallacy.
Your fallacious reasoning of a rabbit.
What's the fallacy? What's the fallacy?
Because a rabbit.
What's the fallacy?
For a rabbit, I'm putting this into context to save time.
No, just tell me the fallacy and we can examine it together. Just tell me the fallacy.
Do not interrupt me. I'm pointing out your blunder. So allow me to finish, is that for a rabbit to exist and then to go ad infinitum would be fallacious, because that rabbit would be contingent on our biblical Christological God as the antecedent nascent creator for the aforementioned rabbit. Ergo, our biblical Christological God is eternally absolute. Thus,
no, it's an eternal rabbit. It's infinite. It's infinite, so it's eternal. It's eternal.
Biblically, the rabbit is just a semantic label to our biblical Christological God.
So is God. God is a semantic label as well. That's what God is. That's what
God
when I
is not a
reference
semantic
God,
label.
it is a semantic label, and you're presupposing the existence of God ontologically aside from that semantic label. But what you're not understanding is that when I reference God, I am not referencing an ontological truth. I am referencing a semantic label.
Biblically, via sacred theology of our biblical Christological God, we know that the the universe.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
Excuse me, do not interrupt me. Is that you and I know that the universe came into existence, ergo, all the immediate of tangible particulars are finite in size, contingent on our absolute biblical Christological God. So this comports with Genesis 1:1, that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Ergo, thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God. Respond.
Okay, so now biblical has descended into telling me what I know, and this is the danger of sort of this theistic sort of tract. You're now saying, hey, you know that God exists, and it's you know, a presuppositional staple. Because he presupposes God, he must project that presupposition onto everybody around him. And it's quite frankly, it's absolutely ridiculous that he will claim to know what I know better than myself. And I don't understand where you would get that incredible sense of projection from. I will tell you what I know, not the other way round. Now, the absolute biblical God, you say, matches up with Genesis. There's a lot of things that scientifically we've discovered that doesn't match up with Genesis. According to Genesis, the earth was formed first and then there was light, which we know from the formation of the universe. And this is way off topic from presuppositional ontology, I might add, but you did open the Genesis door. That light was the first thing. Stars formed before planets. We know that to be true, and that's something that contradicts with Genesis. And so basically, biblical just wants to presuppose this God, and that's it. You're not allowed to question it. Anytime you reference God, it confirms his presupposition. It is a semantic argument. It is simply saying, hey, words mean things, therefore I can choose the thing that works.
Biblically, for thou to be critiquing the Bible, you must first presuppose the canonicity of our biblical Christological worldview in order for you to make critiques about the Bible. Thus, thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God by presupposing Zo's existence.
Yeah, but that affects none of the ontology. Even if I did, that affects nothing of the ontology of it. Do you understand that a presupposition doesn't necessarily change what is or is not true in reality? Do you understand that?
Biblically, clarifying questions aren't potential destroyers contra our biblical Christological God.
So I just want to point out here, number one, biblical keeps accusing me of making fallacies and then won't name any fallacy that I'm making in a very, very dishonest way. He's just like shouting fire in a crowded theater, and then when people say, hey, where's the fire? He goes, oh, it's there, just trust me. Absolutely ridiculous. And secondarily, he's demanding yes or no questions from me and refusing to answer any question that I present to him. This debate isn't a debate. He wants to be able to present statements without them being overviewed or debated about. He wants to ask questions but not be asked questions. This is a presuppositionalist bread and butter. And if you don't answer my questions, why should I answer yours, biblical?
Biblically, my earlier premise and conclusion wasn't a question, so I'll reiterate the aforementioned premise and conclusion contra thou is that thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God.
That's not a question. And my question that I asked is, if I can't ask you clarifying questions, why should I answer any of yours, is what I asked. So if you could answer that one.
Biblically, thy hasn't properly addressed my earlier premise and conclusion, as clarifying questions are not potential destroyers contra our biblical Christological God.
Yes, I understand.
Do not interrupt me.
I understand that you don't want me to ask clarifying questions, but my question back is, why should I answer any of yours if you won't answer mine?
Biblically, for the sake of this discourse, your clarifying questions presupposes the meta-ontotheology of our biblical Christological God,
No, it
as
doesn't.
we are betwixt the same reality, contingent on our biblical Christological God.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't presuppose any ontology of God. It just doesn't. Okay, it doesn't. I do not presuppose the meta-ontological nature of God. I don't.
You just made a claim, so elaborate, substantiate on your claim.
Yeah, I don't think God's real.
Biblically, you just presuppose his existence within that.
That doesn't change. Okay, so again, I'll repeat: a presupposition does not change the ontology of something. I can presuppose anything; it doesn't make it real. I can presuppose that there is a pink rabbit on my table. It doesn't make it real. So how does it make it real? From presupposing something to the ontology changing. Explain that.
Biblically, to reiterate my earlier point,
well, I'd like an answer to my question.
Be neutral and netting the actus purus of our biblical Christological God, because you are finite in size, contingent on our absolute perfect biblical Christological God. So biblically, your proclaims of rabbits, aliens, islands, etc., do nothing, do absolute zilch in conjunction to our biblical Christological God.
I'd like an answer to my question, please.
Biblically, firstly, for us to move forward, your clarifying question presupposes our
Give me an answer to my question.
God.
Give me an answer to my question, please.
Well, biblically,
answer, please.
I'm
Look,
asking
if you don't
clarifying
answer,
question and netting your
why should I answer your clarifying questions if you don't answer mine?
Biblically, I'm asking a clarifying question.
Why should I answer your clarifying questions if you don't answer mine? This is a two-way street. You don't get to say you're not allowed to ask clarifying questions, but I want to clarify. No, you don't get to do that. That is completely unacceptable. You're also giving statements and saying they're questions. You're claiming that I'm using fallacies, then won't name the fallacy that I'm using. You are absolutely embarrassing, dude. Seriously. What? Why should I answer your clarifying questions if you don't answer mine?
Biblically, I'm going to ask you a clarifying question in relation to your
that I decline to answer. I decline to answer.
I'm asking you a clarifying question.
I don't care.
My clarifying question.
I don't care. I honestly don't care. I don't care. You won't answer my clarifying questions. I don't have to answer yours. This is real. This is life. You seem to be painfully oblivious to how life works, that if you say to people, hey, I'm not going to answer your clarifying questions because I don't have to, people are going to do the same to you. This is common sense. Like, what don't you understand about this?
Biblically, I'm asking you a clarifying question in relation to your clarifying question.
It's like he doesn't even hear. It's like he doesn't even hear what I say.
Do not interrupt me. I'm asking you a clarifying question.
I don't care.
Then my brute fact still remains standing.
It's not a brute fact. You claim it's a brute fact and you presuppose that it's a brute fact. But how does that presupposition translate into reality? Which you decline to answer. You just completely don't answer that. Every single clarifying question I have asked, you have basically said, I am not going to answer clarifying questions.
And guys, I will say we have about 15 more minutes of open discussion before we move into the Q&A. So keep on sending your questions and comments to James W. and myself at Amy Newman in chat. But I want to send once again thank you to both of our interlocutors, and we'll send the ball back in if you guys have some more questions for each other.
I don't see the point. I honestly don't see the point, because if I can't ask clarifying questions, but I have to answer them, and if I can't ask questions to biblical, or he won't answer them, and I have to, what's the point of having a debate? Like, there's no point.
Biblically, I will answer your clarifying question, but I'm pointing out.
I've asked a ton of them, and you haven't.
I'm pointing out, for the sake of this discourse, I'm pointing out your blunder. Is that by you asking me clarifying questions, you're meta-ontologically presupposing the meta-ontotheology of our actus purus biblical Christological God.
No, so I am entertaining the concept of God, but I am not presupposing their meta-ontological nature. I am not. You're claiming that, and you have nothing to back up that claim besides, oh, I presuppose that, or I claim to as well, or I assert it as well. You just claim it. It's vapid. It's vapid, useless, and absolutely banal. It's a banal claim.
Biblically, our biblical Christological God has multiple attributive adjectives. Ergo, for a proper noun of multiple attributive adjectives to be understood betwixt your dualistic vessel requires active divine revelation, which again comports to Romans 1:20. So biblically, my brute fact still remains meta philosophically standing contra thou, is that thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God.
So you claim, but that's a presupposition. How does a presupposition, which is a semantic label or a semantic construction, get translated into an ontological truth? Go, answer that question.
Biblically, clarifying questions aren't potential destroyers contra our biblical Christological God. Your questions are informal fallacies. Your questions are informal fallacies.
You did say you would answer one of his clarifying questions, biblical.
Well, it's not even a clarifying question. It's just a question regarding how semantic presuppositions become ontological truths. That's all it is. It's just he doesn't want to answer any question that I present him with. It's dishonest. It's absolutely dishonest, while at the same time demanding answers of me and saying you've got to answer yes or no to a statement. It's ridiculous. It's so dishonest.
Biblically, you either have to deny or provide a defeater, which you can't, because our biblical Christological God is eternal.
Defeater for what? Defeater for what?
Biblical, there isn't a defeater.
Could you answer my question? Could you please answer my question?
Do not interrupt me.
You're not answering my question.
I'm addressing your response, is that because our biblical Christological God is irreducibly complex, Z cannot be superseded with absolute zilch as an absolute starting point, because it takes an eternal mind / consciousness to have always existed for there to be a reality of multiple dimensions. Biblically, your clarifying questions are informal fallacies. So I'll reiterate my earlier statement, is that
what fallacies?
Thou, do not interrupt me. Do not interrupt me. Thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God. Respond.
Okay, so your fallacy is begging the question. You basically, in the premises of your argument there, you said it was irreducibly complex, which is actually a fallacy and is begging the question. You are putting the conclusion in the premises, which is a fallacy, which, unlike you, I can actually name, which is funny because all throughout this, I've asked you to name the fallacies that I've been making so we can discuss them, and you've just refused to do so because you don't know what they are. You just call out fallacy for anything that you don't like. So this question that I had was, how does a semantic presupposition turn into ontological truth? And you've just avoided the question. You haven't answered it. You've just gone back to this script that you've got that just basically says, oh, I'm presupposing God. You beg the question by putting the existence of God in the premises, and then you just repeat and rinse no matter what you're asked. So I don't see the point of this debate, because biblical here isn't actually debating. All that he's doing is dodging questions, demanding answers, and refusing to clarify any of the nonsense gibberish that he's actually saying.
Biblically, your surmise claim towards me is a tu quo qui fallacy, which is another word for an informal fallacy, as you have not properly.
Tu quo quo.
Do not interrupt me. So I'll reiterate my earlier statement contra thou, is that thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God.
Okay, so a tu quo quo fallacy is where you accuse the other side of doing exactly the same as you are doing, right? So a tu quo quo fallacy is when somebody is doing something wrong. For instance, somebody is lying, and you say, hey, it's wrong to lie. And the other person says, hey, but you lied the other week. What the other person is doing is a tu quo quo. It's basically, just because you lied the other week doesn't mean that you're incorrect about them being a liar. So I don't know how a tu quo quo will apply to this. Because I've asked questions about how a presupposition, a semantic presupposition becomes ontological truth. And if that's a tu quo quo, then that means that I think that that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Biblically, thou has failed to present an argument or a potential destroyer contra our biblical Christological God, because thou knows that our biblical Christological God cannot be destroyed by an external particular.
Yeah, you don't know what I know. You don't know that. And any claim that you do is ridiculous, because I can easily demonstrate that I know what I know better than you do. And if you wanted that, defined, pick a number and see if you can guess the number that I'm thinking of. I can pick the number that I'm thinking of because I know what I know and you don't. And so that just describes that as a complete asinine statement, that you claim to know, to think what I know is just ridiculous. The tu quo quo, I mean, you haven't even addressed that at all, where the tu quo quo is or how it applies, but you obviously don't understand fallacies. I guess you just grabbed the most intellectual sounding one without actually understanding what it is. And you just presuppose this God without ever addressing how the presupposition actually becomes ontological truth, and you still haven't answered that question. So if you could go ahead and answer that question, not some other question that you've got on your script, that would be great. Go ahead. Go. How does...
Biblically...
Yep.
Biblically, I addressed this with my earlier statement. So address my statement. I addressed this with my opener. So address my earlier statement is that thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God. Respond.
That's a statement. Prove it.
Biblically, because our
prove
biblical Christological God, because
prove God is ontological.
Biblically, thou can't destroy our biblical Christological God because our biblical Christological God is ultimate. Respond.
Well, it's a reductio into absurdum. I can come up with all kinds of ultimate things and infinite things and omni-powerful things. I can come up with an omni-powerful dragon by the name of Dennis that is infinite, all-powerful, all-knowing, an absolute, infinite, eternal, omni-being. And it's absurd. It reduces it to the absurd. And this is what a number of philosophers have done. This is why the presuppositional argument isn't popular even among Christians, even among theists. It's not popular because all you have to do is come up with another concept to show that presupposing that being is absurd, which it is. And there's your defeater.
Biblically, your proclaims of infinite beings are just semantic labels to the one true God.
So is God.
That
So is
being
God.
our biblical Christological God. Biblically, you are lying when you say you don't know our biblical Christological God. Thus, my brute fact still remains standing contra thou. Is that
Okay,
thou
so
can't destroy
you're
our
saying
biblical
I'm
Christological
lying.
God.
So you're claiming to know what I know more than me. Is that correct? I just want a yes or no.
Biblically, yes, you are lying when you say
Okay.
you don't know our biblical Christological
Okay,
God.
so you're claiming to know what I think more than me. So pick a number. Pick a number.
Biblically, the questions are not
I said to
potential
pick a number.
destroyers.
Yeah, no, I'm just clarifying. Pick a number. I just want to demonstrate that you don't know what I think better than me. Pick a number.
Biblically, questions aren't potential destroyers contra our biblical Christological God.
Pick a number.
Biblically, please stay
Pick a
on
number.
topic here. Please stay on topic.
You have made a claim that you can determine what I know and what I think better than me. I mean, it is a ludicrous claim, but you seem dead set on standing to that claim. So you should be able to pick the number on this pad better than I can.
Biblically, yes, you are lying when you say you don't know our biblical Christological
No, I'm
God,
not.
which was,
I'm not.
it goes without being said.
I'm not.
It goes without being said.
It doesn't go at all.
But I'm just articulating this for the sake
It doesn't. It doesn't go at all.
So, because our biblical Christological God is eternal, thou can't supersede.
Taking the question fallacy.
Biblically, you have yet to present an argument contra our biblical Christological God.
Yeah, I presented plenty of arguments. You're just using the begging the question fallacy. Your conclusion is in the premises. You've smuggled it in there because logical fallacies are your bread and butter. You can't know what I know any better than me. I am the author of what I know. You are not. Apart from this blindingly obvious fact that I can demonstrate, even though you don't want me to do it, because you know that I will demonstrate that I know what I know and think better than you. So you're hurrying away from it because you don't want to go there. It's obvious that somebody knows their own mind better than somebody external. It's such a simplistic thing, but for some reason you've chosen to die on this hill of claiming, which is an empty, worthless, and completely useless claim, that you know what I know better than me, that I know God somehow, which is clearly not the case, and that I'm lying, which is clearly not the case. It's absolute rubbish. I've never met a worse argument than I know what you think and you're lying about what you say.
Biblically, your monologue is not a potential destroyer contra our biblical Christological God. Respond.
Well, it's not a destroyer of the God, it's a destroyer of your claim that you can know my mind without me telling you. That's a ridiculous claim. It's ludicrous.
Biblically, it's not a claim, it's a brute fact. I was articulating earlier
look,
is that
just because you say something's a brute fact doesn't make it so.
Biblically, you're making a claim in conjunction in relation to my brute fact. So the onus is on you to substantiate on your claim. However, for the sake of this discourse, I'll reiterate my earlier brute fact is that you can't destroy our biblical Christological God.
Don't have to destroy it if it doesn't exist.
Biblically, you have to presuppose our biblical Christological God first in order for you to make a premise and conclusion.
No, I don't.
Thus, you have contradicted yourself.
No. What I presuppose is and I ran through this before, is a God concept central to religions and is the fixation of their worship. That's the God that I'm referencing, not ontologically somehow it's a God of all these omnis and stuff. But you still haven't explained how a semantic label gets transformed into ontological truth. And I feel like you're dodging that question because you don't have an answer.
And you can have a response biblical, and then we are going to move into our Q&A section.
Biblically, the concept to address your earlier sentence is that you're appealing to the omni-two-ness of our biblical Christological God, not a concept. So you're actually appealing to the divinity of our immaterial biblical Christological God. That's my time. I yield my time.
All right. Thank you so very much. In fact, I want to thank both of our interlocutors for that spicy back and forth. However, we are going to move into our Q&A section of the debate. So if you have questions
Mark, what's ready?
Woo-hoo, that's right, baby. Any questions for Mark Reid or Biblical Christological account for the win? Now is the time to do so by tagging James W. and myself in chat at Amy Newman. And we will start off with Dave Gar asked 2 questions for the win. Number 1, did you say the word Christological?
Biblical Christological, yes.
And then number 2, if yes, what does Christological mean?
Biblically, Christologically is annetting our Lord Jesus. So by putting the word Christological in context with my username is that our Lord Jesus is God and vice versa. I end my time.
Thank you so very
Thank you.
much. And question from Gonna Go For It. What's up, Peter? Will
Peter.
Mark survive this unscathed? What is your response?
Oh no, I'm scarred for life with this.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I'll be fine. But yeah, I think I'll be fine.
You won't need any therapy to get over it?
Look, I'll handle it. I'll get over it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question from Alexandra. What is up? It really sounds as though one is attempting to debate and the other is attempting to proselytize. Do you have any?
Should we just work out which between us?
Any
The audience can make up their own minds, I think.
I thought I would ask that because it seemed like a comment, but no comment from either Mark or Biblical. We're moving forward.
Keep it moving.
From Discovering Ancient History with Pat Lowinger, which of the biblical gods is he talking about? I really want to know. How does... he's got 2 questions. So how about which of the biblical gods is he talking about?
Biblically, our biblical Christological God. So there is only one God.
Not in the Bible. Not in the Old Testament.
Yes, the same God.
Well, there's
Same
Yahweh,
God.
there's El, there's Baal. Which one are you talking about?
Biblically, we are not advised to reference our Heavenly Father by his name. So pardon yourself for that. So
I don't care. Yahweh? Is it Yahweh or is it El?
Biblically,
they sort of all got meshed into one. Yeah. Yahweh?
Lord Jesus. That's my answer. Is Lord Jesus.
Oh, okay.
Was there a follow-up question, Amy?
And then the second part of that is, how does biblical get around the biblical account of Yahweh being the son of Elohim and thus a subordinate divinity of Israel?
Our biblical Christological God has multiple names. So when he created the universe, he was assigned a name, which I'm not going to say out of respect of our Heavenly Father.
Yahweh? Is it Yahweh?
He has a greater name that translates to the God Almighty.
That's like
starts with an E. It starts with an E.
Unpronounceable name? Or?
Starts with an E, ends with an I. L, that's the first two letters. So yeah,
El Shaddai?
Yeah, that's the one.
El Shaddai.
That addresses.
God Most High.
I yield my time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Biblical. Moving along, Leophilius says, told him I would make sure this got read. Please tell Mark in the private chat to start saying biblical before every statement.
I think one person doing that is enough for both of us, to be honest with you, Leo. I couldn't.
And
would you like to respond to that? Would you like a biblical response to that?
Moving on, Randolph Richardson says, please show this to Mark on screen now. Fire. So you got a fan out there, Mark. Send them love.
Thank you. Love you all.
To Randolph out there. And comment from V57 at Amy Newman. I agree. As a theist, I feel the theist should entertain a discussion. Ooh, getting some spice out there, Biblical.
Yeah, biblically, I was happy to have a discussion with Mark. However, he didn't address my brute fact properly, because you have to concede to the awesomeness of our biblical Christological God first in order to be complaining about him, which you seem to be doing.
So, can I just add, that really sounds like you've got to agree with me in order to have a discussion with me. I'm sorry, that's what it sounds like. I'll give you the last word, Biblical.
Biblically, I gave you this opportunity when I articulated my brute fact contra thou, is that in order for us to move forward in this discourse, concede first to the awesomeness of our biblical Christological God. That way, your questions will become more intelligible. By you.
Thank you so very much, and keep on sending your questions in, guys, and comments. I see a few coming in now. Randolph asks, question for Biblical: how do you reconcile the paradox of your God being omniscient and omnipotent? He can use this power to later change events he foresaw.
What was the paradox?
Omniscience and omnipotence.
Like he can do anything and he knows everything, because if he already knows what he's going to do, then he can't do anything different. So he'd be constrained by his own will or his own knowledge, I guess, be what they're trying to say.
Yeah, biblically, omniscience would just be, omniscience supersedes omnipotence. So omniscience would cover that. But I don't see where the paradox is.
The paradox is where if one is superseded, if something supersedes omnipotence, then it's not omnipotence. It's limited.
Well, no, because omniscience covers all of that. Omniscience covers omnipotence.
Well, omniscience assumes that you can see the future, right? You can see everything that's about to happen. But you can't change that future, because if you change it, then you wouldn't be omniscient. You wouldn't be able to predict the future. And that means that you have limitations on your power, which rules out omnipotence. And that's why most theists sort of go for maximally powerful rather than omnipotent, because maximally powerful says you can do anything except those kind of paradoxes.
Biblically, I don't see the paradox
I bet you don't.
as our biblical Christological God can see into the future, and this has been demonstrated betwixt us as we are amidst his eternal power. So I could be thinking of a number, and then I just happen to see that number 3 times in a row walking by the side of a street. I think of this number and I see this number like amidst the license plates of cars.
Wow, you think that's a display of omnipotence or omniscience?
What I was saying, that is clear evidence of God's eternal power. As
really?
As
it's not just coincidence that you're thinking of a 7 and you see a 7.
No, it's not a coincidence, because this happens almost every day.
Yeah, coincidences do. Sure.
And you can't deny it. This is Romans 1:20.
You are making the claim that if somebody thinks of a 7 and they walk past a 7-Eleven, that's a demonstration of God's power.
No, I'm talking on a personal level, that I could be thinking about something in my mind, a number, a thought, it could be anything, and in actuality, what I was thinking is there in actuality. So that's evidence of God's eternal power. Thus, we need to bow our knee to our Heavenly Father. I yield my time.
Question coming in from Iron Charioteer. Always have to lighten the mood every once in a while. Biblically, can you tell us a joke?
Biblically, there is no such thing as atheists.
Oh, snap. The spice
That's funny.
is on
That is funny. That's hilarious.
You say that because of Romans? Because it says we all...
Well, it implies that it's a joke, so it's not true, right?
And...
yeah. I think you missed the mark there.
Question from Alexandra. For biblical, do you believe the Trinity is homeostasis or homeosution? I should bring up the actual 2 words. Give me 1 second. Showing to you in private chat. I'll see if I can bring it up on screen as well.
Let me see.
Yeah, hang on. Biblically, I'll just Google the definition of this. So is the Trinity this or that? Yeah, well, the Trinity is the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I'll just look up the other definition. Well, biblically, well, to put this into context, so hopefully this addresses your question, is that our biblical Christological God is singular by default, thus he is immaterial by default. And then he came down in a finitely custodated form, as we call his Lord Jesus, as it would be contradictory for God to die for our sins. Then Jesus resurrected and became a part of his omnitude self. So the Trinity is the Trinity. Are you?
Biblically speaking. Right.
Question from Iron Charioteer. For biblically, was Adam made before Eve, or were they created together?
Biblically, Adam and Eve weren't created, as they were made from, well, they're dualistic. So the material bodies were created. However, their spirit was a part of God. So God breathed into the nostrils of Adam, and then Adam became a living being. So essentially, we are not created. It's just our material bodies are created. So Adam, Eve came after Adam. So God took a rib out of Adam and then made Eve. And it just so happens to be that the rib takes 6 weeks to regenerate itself. So that hopefully addresses that person's question. So to summarize that, we are not created, as we are being a part of God from the start. It's just our material bodies that have been created.
Thank you. And question from Big Scream Bird, who's now a vegetarian. Who assigned God his name?
Is that for me?
I believe
it's not for me. I think so, yeah.
That's just, no, God hasn't assigned. God is immutable, so he has always been who he is. Look, I'm in awe to his eternalness as well, but for me to get a grasp of it is like having a lucid dream. So when you enter a lucid dream, you are a part of that dream. So you are already moving or functioning in that dream. You don't question your existence in that dream. So I put that into context with the eternalness of our biblical Christological God in relation to his eternalness. So God is an unmoved mover / immutably mutable. And the best way for me to get a grasp of this is dreams. I yield my time.
Yeah, do you mind if that wasn't direct to one in particular, so could I address that?
Yeah. Sure. I would say address that and then let biblical have the final word.
Okay, sure, yeah. So God's had many names and many attributes over the course of human history. Like we were talking before about El and Yahweh, and I think it was his consort, Asherah. I might be, paddle for getting that wrong. Yeah, they were sort of merged into one, and they didn't always have this triune nature. They didn't always have these properties. So in order to sort of grow and develop out of the pantheon that he was in, with El the chief and Yahweh and his brothers underneath that, Baal being one of them, different things have been assigned to them. And if you take that sort of definitional presupposition on board, that means that God changed with our idea of him over time, which is clearly absurd. And it's only during modern times has this presupposition of the immutable, eternal, uncaused cause kind of even come up. It wasn't something that used to be around. Who gave God his name? Many people over many years.
And then
Biblically.
if you wanted to have anything to add on to that, and if not, we'll just go on to the next question.
No, that's okay. You can move on.
All right, we're moving right along. Question from Simos Funk. What is up, Simos? For biblically, does he practice always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have? Quoting the Bible.
1 Peter 3:15.
Yeah, I make it explicitly known to my interlocutor that they can't destroy our biblical Christological God. I mean that's that goes without being said.
It doesn't answer the question though. They asked you about 1 Peter 3:15. Always provide a reason for the hope in your heart and do so with gentleness, kind of thing.
I addressed that. My earlier statement addresses that.
And question from Randolph Richardson. Thanks to Biblical Christological account and Mark Reid for an interesting and lively debate. Woohoo! Sending that
Randolph.
Right back at you, Randolph.
He's a champ.
In fact, we need to get him on here along with maybe
Mark.
Yeah.
Maybe he should debate biblical. Maybe.
Hey, maybe a.
I'm sure he would love to, Mark. I'm sure he would.
I have sent an email. We have exchanged emails or discourse messages. So if you want to host that, I'm all for it. You just have to ask Randolph.
Maybe we'll have to find another juicy subject, but I like it. We'll get both you guys back on here and send in love. Let's go for Peter, who asks, can you ask for the win to think of, give me 1 second, 278,478,025.24593 and then point out where he sees it in reality right now?
Where I see that number.
Mm-hmm.
What's the context of the question?
Can you ask Biblical to think of where 200...
Oh, I think it was due to you saying that you think of a number and then you see it in reality. He's giving you a number to think of so you can demonstrate God's power by seeing it in reality.
Yeah, well, I just use the example. I'm using personal testimonies, but for that large number, I mean, sure, if I think of a large number, I may not see that in actuality, but I may see the symbols of that number on a computer screen or a phone, etc.
Oh, the components of the number, you mean? The units that make up the number, the individual digits?
Okay. The digits, yeah.
The 1, 2, 3,
but in
4,
actuality, no, I wouldn't see that.
Okay, fair enough.
Question from Leo Filius. He is reiterating. Let me see if I can get the Latin correctly here. Leo Filius asks, how do Mark Reid and Amy Newman have straight faces every fucking time he says biblically? Yeah.
I'm trying really hard to have a straight face, yes. I'm trying really hard. It's just very, very difficult, especially when something not biblical is being referenced. It's incredibly difficult to keep It does sound a bit weird. Sorry, biblical. It just sounds weird.
Well, biblically speaking, right?
And I just am sending love to both of our interlocutors, who I have enjoyed the back and forth as well as all the people in chat. So send in love as well as your questions. Like from the Sinister Porpoise. Reminds me of a Norm Macdonald joke. What is the answer to life, the universe, and everything? I have my own answer here. But
wow.
42.
for the interlocutor. You beat me to it. Thank you very much, Mark. So we'll cover the skeptic's position. But any other...
The real thing is, what is the question? There you go. There's some more for you.
Biblical, did you want to answer that?
Biblically, the purpose of life is to worship our biblical Christological God. That's it.
No, it's 42. Definitely 42. I've checked.
Question from Iron Charioteer. Statement. Biblically, I just defeated your Christological God. I think that's coming after you, Biblical.
Biblically, his starting premise presupposes himself. However, because he is finite, he can't destroy an absolute God. I yield my time to the next person.
Question from Big Screen Bird. What is up again? Sent in love. He said God was assigned a name. Who assigned that name? I think that's for you, Biblical.
Unless Mark wants
Biblically, God doesn't have to assign anything to himself, as he is immutable and eternal. So he has always been God. That's just the fact. You just have to accept it. That's just who God is. That's my time. Fit to the next question.
All right. We're going to do a few more questions. So now is the time to get them in before we let them do their closing statements and we move into the after show on Discord. However, we're moving down the line for a few more from Iron Charioteer. Genesis 1 says Adam and Eve were created together. Genesis 2 says Adam was created first. How do you biblically reconcile that contradiction?
Can you repeat that?
Absolutely. Genesis 1 says Adam and Eve were created together. And then Genesis 2 says Adam and Eve were created first. How do you reconcile this purported contradiction?
No, it explicitly states that God in Genesis, God made Adam out of dust, so the material vessel out of dust, and then breathed into his nostrils the spirit of life, or in other words, the Spirit of God, and then he became a living being. So, look, I think he's just making up lies. That person.
Oh, okay.
And a question coming in from Simos Funk to Mark. What does the rabbit say about your debate?
The rabbit is a mindless, infinite being. So it says it loves the debate, and it liked and subscribed to Amy's channel, by the way.
Woo, thank you so very much, Mark. And all right. Question from V57. Can I ask him, I assume biblically, a question? Can I ask him a question? Destroy his God on the basis of their God. Let me ask that one more time. Can I ask him a question? Destroy his God on the basis of their God?
No, that's a contradiction. That's a paralogistic premise. It's not even a syllogism. It's paralogistic. Because that person has to presuppose first that our biblical Christological God exists. However, the conclusion is contrary to the starting premise. So there's no syllogism against our biblical Christological God. Because you have to presuppose his existence.
Well, I think what they might be getting at, does God have the power to destroy themselves?
Biblically, yes, if God wanted to, but
how are they omnipotent then? If they can be destroyed, how are they omnipotent?
Well, he would have to not. This is a pure hypothetical, as he is not suicidal, but he could simply limit a part of himself, and then. Yeah, I'm not going down this rabbit trail. So next question.
Okay. It just seems paradoxical to me that God is omnipotent, but he can't destroy himself. It's a paradox. So, like before you said you didn't understand the paradox. Maybe that one's easier to see.
It's not a paradox.
Really?
I think he said theoretically he could destroy himself, but he never would. It's just rhetorical, I guess.
It's not a question of would, it's a question of can he. Because if you're omnipotent, you should be able to destroy yourself, but if you can destroy yourself, you're not omnipotent. It's the same thing as like, can he create a rock too heavy to lift? Yeah, it's exactly
right. He could limit with one hand. So to put this into perspective, with one hand, he can have omnipotence, and then with the other hand, he could limit his omnipotence. So this applies to the rock argument, is that he can lift the rock up at the same time he cannot lift the rock up. And so that question or that argument is a contradiction from premise one.
That seems weird. So he both lifts and not lifts the rock at the same time. How is that possible?
No, he can lift a heavy rock. So I'll start from the start. So God can create a heavy rock with one hand, with his omnipotent hand, and then with his other hand, it can be finite, whatever. So he can lift the rock up and not lift the rock up at the same time.
So he can lift the rock.
They're both true.
So so he can lift the rock at the same time.
It's not a question of what he limits himself to. If he limits himself, then he still has the power to do that. It's a question of what he can do, what is achievable to do. So if he limits himself, he still has the power to lift the rock if he chooses to have that power. But then he hasn't created an unliftable rock, which limits his power. And that's why it's a paradox.
It's not a paradox.
Really?
I'm repeating myself, is that he can, with two hands, he has one omnipotent hand.
Yeah.
For the sake of this hypothetical, there's one omnipotent hand, and the other hand is not omnipotent.
Yeah.
So he creates a rock, so he can lift the rock up at the same time.
Well, he creates a rock that's unliftable, right?
No, because he can do both. He can not lift the rock up, and he can lift the rock up at the same time.
Okay, so you create something that is unliftable, And if you can lift it, I'm not saying he can't limit himself so he can't lift it. I'm saying if that other hand has the potential to be omnipotent and lift it, the rock isn't unliftable. So the question is, can he create an unliftable rock that he cannot lift?
No, it's the question. It's too. The question is a contradiction because he can do both. God is in a different category.
He either has the potential to lift it or he doesn't have that. That's a true dichotomy. He either does have the power to lift it or he does not have the power to lift it. Whether he limits himself or not is irrelevant. He either does have the power or he does not have the power. And if he does not have the power to lift it, then he hasn't created an unliftable rock.
No, but he could be, even before he created the rock, he can do both. So he can.
I think we better move on. I think Biblical's completely missing the point.
No, I've refuted
paradox.
that it's not a
You
paradox.
really haven't. You really haven't. Okay, so can God create a rock that cannot possibly be lifted?
You got to understand that God is
no. That's a yes or a no question. Can God create a rock that cannot be lifted by anybody, including himself?
He can lift and not lift it at the same time.
How is that even relevant? Like, how does that work? That's a complete violation of the law of non-contradiction. Something either can be lifted or it can't be lifted. You can't have something that can and can't be lifted at the same time.
No, there's no contradiction in my response.
Really?
There's that. I'll break this down
again. So there's a coffee cup, right? Either this can be lifted or it cannot be lifted. How does something can and can't lift it at the same time?
Yeah, but you got. Well, that's presupposing that you only have one hand. But for the sake of this question, God has two hands.
Two hands? What are you talking about? I'm not presupposing anything of the sort.
God can create a heavy rock. He can lift it and not lift it at the same time.
But if he can lift it, then it's not an unliftable rock. So he hasn't created an unliftable rock and has no power to create an unliftable rock.
You're dismissing my earlier point, is that for the sake of this hypothetical and with biblical Christological God, with one hand can have omnipotence, and with his other hand have no omnipotence.
But the omnipotent hand can still lift it, right?
Yes, the omnipotent hand can lift it.
So is it an unliftable rock? If it can be lifted by the omnipotent side, is it a unliftable rock?
It's both. It's a liftable rock and an unliftable. It's both.
It's both. It's both a liftable rock and an unliftable rock, even though it can be lifted. How does that work?
That's the question. That's the
question
on me. That's the question. You have to. That's something you have to take up with the questioner. Whoever
you're the one making the claim that this can be done and is not a paradox, and I'm trying to show you it's clearly a paradox. That if God creates something that he can lift with his omnipotent hand, he has not in fact created an unliftable rock and may not be able to create an unliftable rock by his omnipotent self. So that is a limitation on his power. It is a paradox. But you've just sort of said, well, no, I refuse to acknowledge that paradox. I'm going to use contradictory statements to try and prove that it's not a paradox, where it is one of the most famous paradoxes in theology.
It is not a paradox. It is the proposition is a contradiction.
What's contradictory about the proposition?
Out,
What's contradictory about it?
Because our biblical Christological God can do both. You can lift the rock
that's
up
not
and not lift it up.
contradictory about the question. That's not contradictory about the question. The question's very simple.
Well, biblically, via modus ponens, if God can do X, then Y supervenes. So if God can lift a rock,
Then it's not unliftable then.
It's both.
It's both
liftable
liftable
and unliftable.
Yeah, I think we're just going around in circles.
And I think we're going to move on.
Like most paradoxes, really, yeah.
Question from Randolph. For biblical, if the Bible has been biblically proven to be fake, what facts does he biblically place his words on?
Biblically, the meta-onto-theology of our biblical Christological God supersedes the Bible. So the Bible cannot be wrong because an omnibenevolent God would provide the best evidence for human indemnification, debunking all other false gods, which comports with John 3:16 in the Bible. If you reject that, I mean, it's fallacious because an omnibenevolent God is paralogistically fictitious because neither of us are in torment, equivalent to God's omnipotence by default. Thus, to summarize all of that, only a loving God can exist, and only our biblical Christological God is loving because he gave a part of himself for human atonement. That's my time.
Okay.
Thank you so very much. Question from V57. Can an alternative theist destroy his God on the basis if they're not his God?
Can you repeat that, please?
Can an alternative theist destroy his God on the basis if they're not his God?
Well, only one God can exist. That question requires clarification because a demigod is contingent on our biblical Christological God. So one has to come first for the sake of this question to be intelligible. One God has to supersede the other, but if he's saying that both have existed, well, then that's fallacious because that implies a gap in between the aseity of those gods. So only one God can exist by default. I yield my time to the next question.
Just to jump in here, Randolph says that he so someone attributed a question to him, and it actually came from Ox. So I just want to say thanks for your question, Ox. I don't know, it was a couple of minutes ago, but I really appreciate you sending it in. Oh, it's just Ox didn't tag Amy. That's why Randolph re-asked it.
Yes, okay. I will say I'm trying to catch all of the comments that I had. It helps James W. and myself find your comment. If you can tag me at
if you can resend them if we haven't read them, then
yes.
Sometimes it is hard for us to.
And we're getting a bunch of good questions. So I want to thank all of our viewers out there like you. Yeah. I know, sending so much love. It's been a great back and forth. We're going to do a few more questions. The Sinister Purpose asks, but I have another question that I'm sure Amy Newman and the people here can't answer. Why is this HTML browser ignoring my PHP code put inside of an HTML file? I feel like Mark could answer this, but I would also just like to explain very quickly that it's not answering to your PHP code because it probably has a HTML index at the end of it, and thus it's not going to read any fancy anything fancier than HTML. Maybe a little CSS if you can throw it in there. But try changing the extension to a PHP, and then you can load as much HTML as you want in there. And then you can load up that and SQL to your heart's content. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's
we have
the
a
second fun question of the night. Sending so much love.
Thank you,
I know that this is almost Mark's background as well.
No, HTML is not my specialty.
Oh,
I deal with Java, C, and things like protocols and networking and stuff. So that's that's a beautiful answer, though. Absolutely wonderful.
Is there a biblical or ontological response to that?
Ontological HTML.
Yeah, I'm not too tech savvy.
The Bible
so I couldn't address that question.
On that one. Okay.
I'm just happy I got to speak within my band of expertise. And look, whenever you get to do that, you get excited. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, The Sinister Purpose. We have a few more questions on Debate Me, Brah, ontological presuppositions. And we are once again sending love to both of our interlocutors who came on for all of the spice. Question coming in from Jake 4D. What is up? Can God microwave a burrito so hot he himself cannot eat it?
Yeah, he can do both. He can
same thing. Yeah.
eat it. And
I don't think we should rehash this one. It's it's a paradox.
He
can both eat it and not eat it, both at the same
time.
Yeah.
The Sinister Porpoise is then asking, do you know what the law of non-contradiction is?
Yeah, that's one of the laws of thought. I'm familiar with the law of non-contradiction.
Do you believe in the law of non-contradiction? Do you think it holds?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, they're logical absolutes, is what they're called. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, comment. Some spice from Iron Charioteer says he's done stick a fork in him.
Was that to me?
I don't know. Yeah, I think you got a fan out there.
Yeah, maybe.
Ooh, sending love, Iron. And then question from Pieta. Is one hand not omnipotent? So God can tallywhack thinking it's someone else?
Tallywhack?
15 foot. If one hand is not omnipotent, can God touch himself, thinking it's someone else? That's what he wants to know. Peter's asking the hard, touching question.
Very hard questions. Yes, turgid.
How hard, Mark?
Depends on how. I'll answer for Mark. It depends.
Well, it depends if you think it's someone else or not.
Oh well, that too. But yes, the hard-hitting questions here. I don't know if Biblical is going to answer, but I think we found an answer in there somewhere. Iron Charioteer, question for the win. Biblically, do you eat shrimp and pork and wear mixed fabrics?
Yeah, I eat shrimp and pork. Jesus declared all foods clean. You have to Google the specific verse for that, which I could do, but to save time, I mean, the person can do it himself. I'll yield my time to the next person.
Question from Randolph Richardson for Biblical. Does omnipresence explain how God can both do an action, like lifting a rock, and not do an action, like not lifting a rock, at the same time?
Omnipresence is the size of God. He's asking, how does God's omnipresence affect him creating a rock? I think he's getting omnipotence mixed around with omnipresence.
Question from Randolph Richardson. If this is not explained by omnipresence, then how is it reconciled?
Well, his omnipresence is he's at all places at the same time, in the past, present, and future. So he's mixing in a rock within his omnipresence. So that question's unintelligible.
He's everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
Question from the Sinister Purpose. I think we're missing the important question here. Is the liftable, unliftable rock atheist or agnostic? Oh my. Trying to send in the real spice within the non-believer community.
Liberal or conservative, come as you are.
So you've missed one of the categories. It can actually be an igtheist, which it means it has no knowledge of God. It is ignorant of a God concept.
But we just heard that doesn't exist today.
Oh, really? Well,
You have to know. Yeah.
And if you don't, you're lying.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's such a strange view you've got there.
Question for Biblical from Peter. Will you be joining the Discord later, biblically or otherwise?
No, I need to stretch. I need to walk. It's been over 2 hours, so I need to get off my computer.
Are you on our Discord?
I'm with Tang. Is that...
Tang is like our bigger sister, bigger brother group. We are highly Tang gang over here.
We definitely support Tang Gang, but we are a different channel.
Well, if you send me a link, like a private link, I'll
that sounds good. And I will also be linking the Discord in chat. I'll be sending it into all of our streaming platforms. And so this is your last chance, ladies and gentlemen. I'm seeing a lovely people up there in Twitch. I want to send love to them on Facebook and, of course, on YouTube. I think we're going to do maybe 3 more, and then we are heading out, ladies and gentlemen. It has been fun. Exactly. Couldn't have said it better. Jake 4D asks, can biblical state the laws of logic and explain them very briefly?
The law of identity is that it's either A or not A. The law of excluded middle, that it's either it's A or not A. The law of non-contradiction, that A cannot equal itself. And then you've got the law of polarity, that there's always an opposite to a proposition. But yeah, there's a lot of laws out there. I yield my time to the next person.
Yeah, so you went through, but you put the same A or not A for 2 of them. Law of identity is actually A equals A.
Yeah, A is A. A is A.
Yeah, okay, never mind. Let the record stand.
Question from Webnuts. If Noah and Eve are brother and sister, how does that not go against the rule of law for not to have sex with your sister?
Yeah, can you repeat that? From the start.
Absolutely. If Noah and Eve are brother and sister, how does that not go against the rule of law for not to have sex with your sister?
Yeah, that's not a direct next of kin. Yeah, I'll leave it as that. Yeah, it's against the law if it's next to kin. Yeah, I don't want to go into that.
Sounds good, and we are moving into from
Final
Richard. Yeah, Richard Madison. What will my loss of potential torque be if I used 7 by 30 seconds instead of a n bit for my clearance to drill for 1/420th, assuming a grade 8 bolt and a 44 mat base? I think that's out of my expertise on that one.
Yeah,
I think
mine too.
he means biblically.
Biblically.
Oh, biblically.
Yeah, he means biblically.
Was
That's
that
not
for
our
me?
expertise.
Was that a question?
Well, I usually don't speak biblically, so probably if he's asking for a biblical answer, it's probably
it would be for biblical Christological count.
Yeah, you're gonna have to repeat that question.
Go ahead, Amy.
Trying to see if I can also get it up on screen, but I will just reread it again. Question from Richard Madison. What will my loss of potential torque be if I use a 7 by 32 nths instead of a n bit for my clearance to drill for a 1 by 40/20, assuming a grade 8 bolt and a 44 mat base?
Yeah, couldn't answer that. You probably have to use Google for that one.
Okay.
So you get the answer Googly?
Yeah, Google, Bing, Yahoo. Was that the last question?
I think
Bing
we
is
just
heresy.
have
Bing is heresy.
Webnuts also wants to know, does God choose the good? Does God choose the good and the bad?
Does he choose the good and the bad for what?
I think he's basically asking, does he make both the good and the bad? Is it just the good? Does he also make the bad?
Yeah, well, people have the freedom of choice to be bad. So God has given us the knowledge of what is evil, and it's on us to choose to love God or not. However, I've chosen to love God, and in return, I will be experiencing eternal paradise. That's my time. Over to the next person.
And all right, I do think that is going to be our last question of the night. I'll do this. Kill Doggy is going to be the last question, and then we are going to go into outros because, look, it doesn't matter when you get here. The love is always here for you. Should we punish people in both this life and the next life?
Well, assuming that's in relation to the lack of fire, yes, those will be tormented in the lake of fire, where they'll be gnashing on their teeth. So to put that into perspective, try biting down on your teeth as hard as you can. It's very difficult to do, especially for a long time. And on top of that, those will be drowning, as a lake on average is 10 meters deep. So there'll be no screaming or yelling, etc. There'll be, it says specifically in Revelations, there'll be weeping and gnashing. So yeah, it's torment. For God to finally tune this universe and our material bodies to have also finally tuned the lake of fire is going to be terrible. So yeah, not a place for me. I choose the opposite. I yield my time.
All right. Thank you guys so very much. And with that, we are going to move into our outros. I want to thank both of our interlocutors here. The link to their channels of which is in the description below. But before we head out to the after show party in the Discord, we are going to head it over to both of our lovely debaters for their final statements of the night. Please give out your channels if you would like to tell what you do there and where they can find you, and then a final thought on the subject itself. And I'm going to start us off once again. Biblical Christological account for the win. Thank you so very much for joining us tonight. You were the affirmative, which means I am giving it over to you for your final statement.
Usually the affirmative ends, like you bookend it, so the affirmative begins and the affirmative ends usually. But I mean, I don't mind.
No. Either way is good. So if you think that is more fair, we can switch it up. Mark, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think that's more fair because he had to introduce. Wait, who introduced? Yeah, so he ends.
He began.
Okay.
Yeah. So
sounds good.
Yeah, so what have we heard here with any kind of relevance or any kind of convincing truth at all? It's basically, I presuppose this is the truth. Any mention of it, we've got, and I'll just go through this. We've got somebody telling me what he thinks that I know and is wrong about. I don't know how he'd demonstrate that he knows what he knows, but he just presupposes that he does. You've got basically someone claiming fallacy after fallacy, but never being able to produce what it actually is. The only time he quoted a fallacy is the tu quoque, and that was wrong and misapplied. He never explained how that was applied to my arguments. I basically reduced it to absurdity, being able to do this for literally anything. He never addressed that or tried to address it in any way. He just claimed that any attempt to defeat this is bound to fail because he presupposes that is the case. Many times I asked him, how do you get from a presupposition to ontological truth? No answer whatsoever, couldn't answer. Basically, he wants to beg the question, include God in the premises, basically say, because God, I presuppose God exists, God does exist. And then he's trying to shift the burden of proof, saying, oh, because I have declared it a brute fact, it is automatically your problem to disprove. And as I pointed out in my opening statement, this is begging the question, and this is shifting the burden of proof, which are two actual fallacies that are correctly applied to his arguments. There's been no even attempt for that. This has been a bit of a ridiculous debate, and I'm sorry, Biblical, I'm going to have to call you out on this. If someone's come into a debate and say, clarifying questions are not going to be answered is absolutely unprofessional and just downright, it's hopeless. I'm sorry. But then to demand that I answer your questions and that you have clarifying questions to me is really, really, I'm sorry, it's childish, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable. We could have had a good discussion over presuppositions and ontological truths and how we get there and what they mean, but instead, as somebody rightly pointed out in the comments, there was only one person debating. The other just came in, declared brute facts, declared their presuppositions to be true, and then basically just said you can't challenge it because you're not allowed to, which is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous position. I'm not. Yeah, I really do feel a bit sorry about this one, because it could have been a good discussion. As it turns out, it is just a continuous declaration that your presuppositions are true with nothing to back it up. And no, we didn't even get to go into the reasons why presuppositions are true, because you just refused to go there. And I got to address the elephant in the room. Starting every single sentence with the word biblically, even when it's nothing to do with biblical statements, it seems like you're just trying to appeal to some kind of authority to give your sentences weight, and I'm really sorry they don't have any more weight, because biblically is before them, as well as the words that you're throwing in, like Z, to try and give it weight, and it's just an appeal to emotion. It's got no extra credibility to your argument whatsoever. So that's me. Thank you so much for watching. Give Amy a like and subscribe. She absolutely deserves it. She's amazing. James, awesome.
Thank you, Mark.
Love your work. And Biblical, thank you for coming. And maybe some other time we can have an actual discussion instead of whatever this was. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
And all right, with that, we're going to hand it over to you, Biblical, for your closing statement. And if you'd like to tell people where they can find you.
Yes. Mark is lying when he says he doesn't know our biblical Christological God. I don't want to really dwell into this. You could watch the recording again to find out for yourself. I use the word biblically as this appeals to the worldview of our biblical Christological God, as biblically is an adverb, which is perfectly fine amidst the starting sentence. I'll conclude with my YouTube channel, Biblical Christological account, FTW. It's my YouTube profile picture is the same as the StreamYard picture, so it shouldn't be difficult to find my YouTube channel.
Not at all.
That's all me. Thanks for hosting, Amy.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so very much. And all right, guys, I hope you had a fantastic time on this episode of Debate Me, Brah, Ontological Presuppositions. Or rather, are there philosophical notions that we assume each day for life to function? I want to thank my co-host, James W., along with both of our debaters, Mark Reid and Biblical Christological account for the win. If you like what you heard today from either of our interlocutors, well, then you can find both of their channels in the description below. If you're feeling fancy, then please like, follow, or subscribe. Or hey, it does. Leave a comment once the video's done. And of course, once the show is over, we will be heading over to the Discord server for the after party, the link of which is in the description below as well. And if you'd like to support even more fun content, well, you can find our Patreon page at patreon.com/Amy Newman. I am Amy Newman, and we will see you all on the next episode of Skeptic Ball Z. Good night,
guys.
everyone. Mwah.
May have a drink before we go to Discord.